So welcome to my YouTube channel, Joe. And today I want to talk about the debt, the issue of the debt. And one of the things that I've been saying, yet unless we solve the problem of the debt in this country, then we are not going to go far as a country, because the biggest challenge that we have is that we have accumulated debt that is becoming a big issue to our country. I wanted us to look at some of the issues, some of the information that can actually be able to guide us in some of these things. And one of the information that I wanted us to look at is actually what is in our business daily today. I want you to look at the business daily and what is there. Treasury emergency loan at CBK hits a record of 91 billion. Unajua serikali inaishi na freezer. You know this is a freezer because what is all here is a situation where the government is borrowing every day so that it can be able to survive or to pay its some of the recurrent expenditure. And the challenge is that we can actually see that this borrowing has actually hit 91 billion shillings, and that is why we are talking about exchequer's cash crunch, because they are actually living with the freezer. Hii ni kama wewe tu vile unakosa pesa ya kufanya tu vitu twako in a day to day operation, unaenda kwa freezer, unaenda kwa tala, unaenda kwa mobile loan applications, unakopa pesa tena unalipa, unachukua ingine kutoka kwa ile, unalipa hii, unaendelea. Now that is what the government is doing. Now the challenge is that money is increasing. If you look at what was there by the end of July, it was at 61 billion. Now by November, it was at 73 billion. By December, it was at 88 billion. So what it is telling you that the government is increasing the freezer. Actually, the government is surviving with the freezer, and that freezer is actually increasing. Now, I've heard very many people say that, things are going to change. But I also want us to look at some few other aspects here. And we try to see whether what people have been talking about is something that is true or false. I want us to look at this as a Seaton report about our debt. And I think with this one, we can actually be able to understand the challenges that we are in. So this is the 2023 review. Actually, this is a very recent report, 22nd October 2023. That is 1 month ago and a half months ago. Now, I want us to look at that graph there. That graph shows the relationship between the public debt and GDP. And anytime you hear the word GDP, what should come into your mind is the output, the total output of a country. Ni zile mazao sisi wenyewe kama Wakenya tunaokota. Now, if you look at 2012, the debt GDP ratio was at 42 shillings percent. What this means is that for every 1 shilling that the government was collecting, 42 cents was going to pay debts. For every 1 shilling the government was collecting in the year 2012, 42 cents was going to pay debts. Now, I want you to go through all this and go to 2023. You can see where it is, 70%. The ratio between what we are collecting as a government, as a country, as a public debt. Now, it means that for every shilling that you collect, 70 cents is supposed to go and pay debt. So what is the meaning for the government is that cents. For every 100 shillings that the government collects, 70 shillings is supposed to go to pay debts. 30 shillings that remains is supposed to pay the teachers and other civil servants. It's supposed to be given to the county. It is supposed to do development. And you can see now why we have to live with a freezer, or why we have to continue borrowing money, because the government cannot actually default on some of these loans. Now, I want us to go to this graph now. You can see now where the challenge is. Our expenditure is always bigger than our revenue. So here we have our revenue in 2012 and our 2013-2014 financial year vis-a-vis our expenditure, and we have the 2023. So you can see in 2012, our revenue ratio was 1 to 1.3. So the difference was about 0.3. Now, I want you to look at 2024. Our revenue was at 2.4. Our expenditure was at 3.1. So the difference was about 0.7, from 0.3 to 0.7. Now, in 2023-2024, by September, from July to September, it was already at 0.2, telling you that those are 3 months, if you do a compounding mathematics of what is going to happen, 0.2, 0.2, 0.2, then it tells you that the ratio between the difference between the revenue and the expenditure will be about 0.8. So now you understand why we have a problem. The problem is not revenue. The problem is that our expenditure is always much more bigger than our revenue. Now you can see the debt. You have the domestic debt. The debt government has actually taken from the country as 4.8. You have another one of 5.7. 4.7, that is the domestic. And the total debt that we have as a country is 10.5%. Now look at the difference between the domestic debt and the external debt. You can see by 2023 August, we had 45% as the domestic and 54% as the 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 external debt. I want you to look at the 54% because we still have to look at something there so that you also understand. Now, we have said that the domestic debt is at 54%. The domestic debt is at 45%. External debt is at 54%. Now, come to this graph here. Look at the composition of our external debt, which is at 54%. 67% of that money is in USD. 18% is in euro. 15% is in yen. 5% is in yuan. 2.3% is in Great Britain pound or pound. Now, what this means is that for every depreciation, 1% depreciation of the value of the Kenya shilling, we have a situation where our debt will always be increasing. We should be increasing because if the USD appreciates in value, then our debt increases. Euro increases value or appreciates in value, our debt increases. You can see our debt will continue increasing because it is in other currency, especially if those currency are becoming more stronger than our currency. More stronger than our currency. Now, I want also you to look at the people who are actually for the domestic debt. You can actually look at the people who have given the government the biggest chunk of the money. So if you go to 2023, you can see the banking institution. Now you understand why the banks have been making a lot of money, because they have actually given the government a lot of money. 45% of the money the government has borrowed in the domestic market. It has actually borrowed from the banks, the insurance company, the parastatals, pension fund like NSSF and NHIF. Then we have what we call the domestic investors, the domestic investors, mtu kama mimi na wewe, the ones who have actually bought treasury bills. Now, I want to go further and look at another graph here, because the good thing about that graph is that it is going to tell us whether we are actually going to come out of the woods, as many people have been telling us. So I want us to look at this graph here. This one is going to show us what is going to happen up to 20. Let me see. Now, this graph here is very important because this graph shows us the national debt ratio to the gross domestic product. Remember, the GDP is the total output of a country, while we have the debt, the accumulated debt, the accumulated public debt or the total debt. Now, you see what we were looking at. We actually got to 2023 and we said, for every shilling that the government makes, 7 cents is supposed to go to pay the debt to pay debt in 2023. Now, I want you to look at what is going to happen to 2025 2026, 2027, and 2028, so that we understand whether that ratio of the gross domestic product of what we are supposed to produce vis-a-vis the national debt or the public debt is actually going to give this country an edge where people we can actually start living a good life. Now, I want you to look at 2024. We have 68% of the ratio will be at 68%, meaning that for every shilling we are going to be making, 68 cents is supposed to go to debt, 66 cents is supposed to go to debt in 2025, 65 cents is supposed to go to debt in 2026, we have 63 cents, and we have 62 cents in 2028, meaning that by 2028, the amount of money that is going to be remaining for the government to do all these other things after paying debt is 38 cents. So the question is, based on that graph that we have there, and that is an economic outlook. That is an economic outlook. Based on these economic statistics that I have here, do you really think that unless a miracle happens to the issue of the debt in this country, are we going to be out of the wood by 2028? It is impossible. Why? Because even by 2028, the government will only have 38 cents as the money remaining to do all the other things that they are supposed to do. Now, I want you to go to 2020 or 2019. Our problems actually started getting worse in 2020 because of the COVID. But if you go back even in 2019, things were not as good as they were supposed to be, even in 2018. And by that time, the GDP to the public debt ratio was about 56%. Now, I want you to look at that statistics of 2025, 2026, 2027, and 2028. Just tell me, whoever tells you that things are going to be okay, without solving this problem of the debt, are we going to be out of the woods by 2028? You can actually see very well, for every shilling that the government is going to be collecting in 2028, 62 cents is going to go to paying debt. 38 cents is the only money, or 30% of the GDP, is the only money that collection is the only money that will be left for the government to do all these other things that it's supposed to do, to give the counties, to pay the civil servants, to actually do development. Now, with that statistic, now you understand why we are living a Fuliza government. We are actually living in a Fuliza government where the government has to borrow daily for it to be able to survive. So I think I have done a good work of trying to explain to you. And by that explanation, now you can actually decide to understand whether things are going to change in this country or not by that time that we have been told by our politicians that things are going to be better. And based on what I have talked about, I do believe that it's an eye opener of you as an individual. What are you supposed to do? You're supposed to continue thinking about how you can be able to tighten your belt, because things are not going to be as rosy as we are being told. So thank you very much. Have a nice evening, and let's meet tomorrow while we look at something else. Thank you very much.